Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Well, welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, where we connect leaders more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber. This is episode 60, and I'm here with Charran, a transformational leader, all about innovation, bringing balance, performance, and really innovative solutions to the world and to leaders and organizations. Eric, how are you today?
Okay, thanks for having me on. I'm fantastic today.
I'm very happy to have you here and looking forward to our conversation. In a moment, we will learn more about Eric. I'll introduce him formally. And before I do that, in the beginning of all these podcasts, we always spend a moment to think about and reflect on why Rooted and Unwavering. So if you're anything like me, your mind will pull you in all kinds of directions at all times of the day. And in that plethora of factors and drivers and interests and needs and values and fears and ideas and ideals, how do we find our way? How do we find our way in a way that when we look back, maybe 5-10 years from now, we say, yeah, I feel proud of what I did and I feel peace about what I did, because this life goes by so fast. I'm 53 years old, and I noticed that it doesn't feel the same as 30, and yet I feel so much enthusiasm for what life has to bring. And so I invite you to listen from that perspective. Help us to make choices, helping us to make choices about how we use this precious life energy that we have as leaders and also more broadly in any station of life. So I'm here today, and we're here today with Charran, who comes to us with a wealth of experience. He is an author also. He has written a book called Have You Ever Had a Boss That? And I'll talk about that book in a moment. He is a visionary technology executive, also and a thought leader with over 25 years of experience in transforming global enterprises through digital innovation, data-driven strategy, and AI-driven solutions. He's worked and spearheaded transformative initiatives at major organizations, including Microsoft and Capital One, where he served as chief architect, bringing substantial advances in cloud resilience, digital transformation, and data infrastructure efficiency. I have met Eric a little bit before, and I'm struck by his energy, his enthusiasm, and also his balance. In his book, Have You Ever Had a Boss That? He offers readers a guide to navigating workplace challenges, enhancing personal effectiveness, and fostering a balanced, fulfilling career. I'm very much looking forward to my conversation with Eric today. Eric, first question, the question I ask every participant in this podcast. Tell me about what you have learned about connectedness in your life and leadership.
Yeah, it's an amazing question, Hilke. And when you first positioned it to me, I really wanted to understand what you meant by connectedness. Is it just being in the room with people at the same time? Is it actually forming both professional and personal connections? Is there an emotional component to it? I mean, we are talking about professional settings after all. And as I began to think about this, I don't know if you remember, but I kind of thought about it in all of those dimensions. So for me, connectedness, I had to kind of define what that actually meant. Connectedness for me is all about making sure that you are professionally and emotionally available to the people that you lead and the people that you're hoping to lead, and the people that matter to you from a professional standpoint. Connectedness is being able to create a method of psychological safety where people can show up as themselves, be able to talk to you and articulate their concerns, whether they're founded or unfounded. And as a leader, one of the things that I often say in these sessions is, how am I showing up? And thank you for trusting me with your feedback, because I know it's not easy to talk to people and to be your honest selves. And I found that in terms of connectedness, if you don't create that safe environment, people will ruminate on the challenges that they have with you as a leader or within the organization, within their situations. And undesirable outcomes and bad behavior kind of result from those suppressed urges.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize is that even though I present myself as the opposite of so many of the leaders I've had in my career, as you know, and I mean, you and I might be around the same age. I'm a Gen Xer. We came up during a time when there was no such thing as psychological safety. Your boss gave orders, and if they didn't like what you did, they would yell at you, and you had to be tough, and you had to, overcome in spite of these things. And the world is a lot different now. So realizing that and trying to be the leader that I wished I'd had back then, it's all about creating that safe space to really understand the roots and the motivations behind people, draw some of that out of your people. And then even the small things, being self-aware when you're in a meeting and you have Teams or Slack messages coming in and you're just, hitting the ball back over the net. That's a visible signal to somebody that you're not fully there, that
Mhm.
you're not interested and invested in what they're saying. So even small things like that really matter. So that's what I've learned about connectedness in my career.
Being available and not being the command and control person that actually creates a situation of lack of psychological safety where people will suppress. I was laughing inside because I was not only a recipient of that leadership at some point, I was also an actor of that leadership. I called myself the devil wears Prada kind of leader. Where are the belts? Maybe you remember that scene with Meryl Streep.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, tell me about how you learned. Tell us about how you learned. Tell us about your leadership journey, your personal journey, a little bit about how did you learn about becoming a leader that's available, and maybe tell us about an experience where maybe you weren't so available and what you learned through that experience. Can you tell us about that, Eric?
Well, I think there's a lot of folks that are maybe around my age and depth of experience in which it's completely accidental, Hilke, that people arrive at this introspective point. Because what I learned is the organizations very rarely prepare new leaders for leadership. And the only skills and capabilities that you have in your toolbox when you take your first leadership position are the ones that you've observed your leaders have. So my son is an amazing student athlete. And one of the things that I used to do is I used to come to his practices. He's a football player, American football. And I would watch the coaches when somebody didn't get a play off correctly, the entire team had to take a lap. And I began to realize that coaches coach how they were coached. Leaders also lead how they were led. And as a result, all of these misfit tools, hammers when you need screwdrivers and so forth, are really what we start out with. And it does take I took a harrowing journey in my leadership journey to realize that at some point, I am making the same, I'm making people feel how I felt when I was in their position. Now, you might say, well, Eric, how did you arrive at that epiphany? And it does take a little bit of self-awareness, which is a muscle I think that some people have. I am not a naturally empathetic person. I am what a lot of people might call cognitively empathetic, which means I know and I can actually use my brain to figure out how people can feel. I don't actually feel their feelings. So that's an additional challenge for me as a person. But there was a circumstance in which I took leadership of a new team. The team was in shambles. People just kind of all over the place. There was no rigor associated with it. And I resorted to a command and control, methodology in which I openly criticized people. I would dress them down in front of others. I'd ask for feedback. I'd say things like silence is acceptance. If you don't, if you don't speak now, then you don't agree. or you complicitly agree, so I don't want to hear complaints later. All the things that I had heard
Mhm.
coming up as a leader from my leaders. And then I began to realize that the few individuals that had the courage to come forward and be like, Eric, there are some people that have feedback, but they just don't feel comfortable voicing in front of others. You have to be aware of this. You have that silence is acceptance is just a way of bullying people into making sure that you agree that they agree with you, or that they don't dare disagree with you. And I said, wow, that is not how I want to show up. That's not how I want to be. That's how I was led, and I have to do something differently. So the few people that were courageous enough to come to me and say, you need to change, and the world is changing. And if you want to retain talent and you want to go far to go together and you want to keep people together, this is how you have to do it.
So go back to that moment where you were in that command and control leadership, and the stakes were probably high. And how did you feel, and what was the thinking that was going around? Because for me and the leaders that I coach, it's important that we're able to be aware of how, of course, like I loved how you said, this is what we learned. We're going to go back there because it's in there somewhere. So tell us so we can recognize it. What was it like for Eric to be in that situation? What was it?
Oh, goodness. Well, so let me be completely honest. My first instinct was, and I get it. I like to be professional. I like to, and so I never have been a yelling boss, right? Like I had a few of those, and I'm like, I'll never do that. But my first immediate instinct or reaction was, this person is, I'll fix them. They have to toughen up.
Yeah.
They have to actually rise to my expectations, and together we're going to succeed. This is just them really voicing the fact that they don't like it. They'll get used to it. And again, the exact wrong mental track, right? Exact wrong. Like that's just perpetuating the sins of the past, right? And then I said to myself, well, I really need to change here, because I don't want to be the type of leader that just hammers people into a shape, and then those who it's sink or swim. That is not the type of environment that I want. And so I've always been a big fan of drawing out and hiring people for their talents. And I realized in that moment that maybe I can't get results out of people the exact same way. Maybe people are not AI, right? Maybe they actually have emotions and considerations and want to be recognized. And I need to play to those strengths. And so, even still, like at my level, there's a lot of organizational tools that people give executive leaders, which is like how to manage 1,000-person organization, how to actually connect with people, how to listen, and all this kind of stuff. It's terrific. But what we really needed to do is aim this at the Eric Charrans of 10, 15 years ago, who was taking on his first leadership position. That's where leadership actually matters a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, it matters at my end too. But we have a lack of tools that we give those leaders. And so a lot of them have to go through this period of self-discovery like I did, which was, nope, they're being too soft. I'll fix that to, oh goodness, maybe they actually do have a point. Let me by accident try to discover the right way to lead.
So I'm wondering, because like how easy that transition was for you, because I'm putting myself in your shoes. I mean, I want to get results. I'm on the hook to get results. I value performance. So I want to make this happen. And then how do we switch from that place to another place? How do you do that?
Yeah. So the pressures are enormous, right? And so the fear is, if I change my stripes now, who's to say that I'm going to meet my quarter, or my quota, or my performance bonus? Like if I change what I do, I'm throwing everything into jeopardy. The advice that I would give looking back is to start small. The one way that I started small was I just use, what is it, 5 words. What I hear you saying is, sorry, 6 words. So just starting there and saying that, hey, instead of just reacting and problem solving, and this is something I learned from my personal life with my wife, like don't jump into problem solving mode. You need to empathize first. This is true at work as well. What I hear you saying is really allows the person on the other end that to say that, hey, he understands me. And then once you reach that level of understanding, you can then move forward and deliver any type of feedback. The other one is the compliment sandwich, right? So when you're delivering feedback, say you're doing a great job, here's an opportunity you have to improve, fantastic work. Like just following that, conversational
Uh-huh.
paradigm, those two things helped immensely. And then I was able to broaden into how I ran group meetings. So when I had my managers and their extended directs on a call, I would say, hey, I would love your feedback. I know that some people are not comfortable in delivering feedback in front of a group or to me directly. Please know that I'm just here to listen, and that will be the end of it. And if you don't feel comfortable delivering it in this format, please contact me directly, and via email or schedule a meeting with me. I will make time. So again, it's those 2 to 3 things that I did chained together that didn't necessarily shatter my perception of how I would be able to perform, but they were small things that I could focus on.
I like that you made it very practical and in a way micro. What I hear you say, very clear. Then doing the compliment sandwich and also creating an open space. I want to hear your feedback. It's important. So 3 things, just 3 practices to retrain yourself to get into a different groove.
Yeah.
Uh,
The other thing that I would love to take credit for, but realizing but I didn't, was that at Microsoft, our chief people officer, her name was Kathleen Hogan at the time, she had realized that the word feedback is not a terrific word. If you came to me, Hilke, and you said, listen, hey, I had you on the podcast, I've got some feedback for you. I'm like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
what did I do wrong? Right. So feedback, even though it's a neutral word in terms of the English language, it is oftentimes, I've got some bad news and some criticisms. So perspectives is how we renamed at Microsoft at the time. We renamed our entire performance management around perspectives. And so I often ask for points of view. I often ask for your thoughts. I don't ask for feedback necessarily, and I don't go to people and say I need feedback. I have to give you feedback. I say things like, "Hey, I've got a perspective." I'll use the compliment sandwich, and then I'll say, "I wish there was somebody around when I made the same mistake that you're making to tell me that, hey, there's a better way to do things."
I love that.
Right. So
Love that.
all of those ways actually lower people's barriers. It lowers the temperature, and I know that it works, Hilke, because there have been perspectives / feedback from my own direct saying that when I talked to your predecessor, I would get nervous, the color would drain from my face, I'd be sweating, my hands would be tingling, and with you, I don't feel that. So those are all elements of that tells me that I'm constantly calibrating myself. Am I doing the right thing, leadership wise?
Brilliant. So I see you talk about these tools, and I'm going to reiterate them because I think they're so powerful. What I hear you say, compliment sandwich, asking for people's perspectives, and even reframing the baggage and temperature and energy around feedback and talking about perspectives. Knowing that I have some feedback for you is actually a very challenging thing for us to hear because we think, well, something bad's going to be told and I'm going to be found out in some way. Yeah. So I'm very curious, Eric. I'm looking to see your thinking about this and your experience with this. Tell us about the greatest perspective / feedback that you've gotten from somebody else for you. Can you tell us about, and I'm using the superlative, one of the great feedbacks or perspectives you've gotten from somebody else? Can you tell us about what it was, how it was delivered, and what your experience was with that?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I had to think here for a second. But one of the things that this actually just happened at a company dinner, maybe like 2 nights ago, sitting next to a colleague that I often don't get a lot of time to spend time with. And we're part of the same organizational structure, but so we show up in these large events and large all hands meetings. But in chatting with this individual, one of the things that he had the opportunity to be very honest with me and say, and I think that I'm in my self-aware, honest, I welcome all feedback, whether it's constructive or not. I know I have a good muscle to strip away the meaning of the feedback and to take the actual feedback myself. And so his basic perception is like, hey Eric, I don't really know what you stand for here at Intuit, for example. I don't really know what did you mean. Like it seems like you have an answer for everything, and you never have any doubt. You never have any elements of challenge. You are always thinking about the next thing. You always answer with assuredness and a certainty, and you answer so fast. And I said, and mature Eric of 2025 is like, okay, so this all sounds like compliments, but there's a reason that this person is
Mhm.
delivering
Mhm.
this. So I had to dig a little bit deeper, and I said, to the individual, this sounds amazing to me, but I'm sure that there's some constructive criticism here. What can I take away from what you're saying? What's really behind,
Yeah.
these observations? And he said, well, if you look at your peers, your leaders, they oftentimes vent. They do everything from vent to their uncertainty and to their challenge to just subtle means of like, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do this, or these are the things I'm concerned about. And he said, you always seem to know what to do. You always have an answer. And I said, wow. And I had to think about that for a little bit. And
Yeah.
I said, well, is that bad? And he said that, well, it might make people think that you are always making things up on the spot and you don't really believe the things you say. And this took me a long time, Hilke, to really say, oh, that's how my experience is perceived. I'm like, it's not. And I'm thinking to myself, and I did get defensive internally.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, no, it's just because I have a lot of experience, and that's what the organization valued for me. That's why I'm here. This is what I'm here to do. I know what to do. I've been here before. And no two experiences are exactly the same. Every organization is unique, but I have enough executive experience to take what I've learned and channel it into the organization. But the way I was coming across isn't the way that I think that this culture valued me. This is a culture of maybe not answers all the time, maybe not 100% assurance, maybe the assurance and the specificity and experience that you bring, you might need to mix that with, but not come across as being overly self-assured,
Mhm.
overly deterministic,
Mhm.
and not listening to and appreciating the challenge of the moment. Because we arrived at in this conversation, Hilke, is that it feels like you're trying to just take cookie cutter things and just slap them on, the
Mhm.
organizational challenges, and you're not diving deep enough into the details to understand it. And I was like,
Mhm.
wow, and it just
Mhm.
goes to show you every day you can learn something still if you've been around for as long as we have, right?
So amazing that you're talking about a strength that you have, which is, I'm thinking about sports. The ball comes here, you're able to volley at the net or place it
Hmm.
immediately. You don't have to think about it or even debrief. So you're able to pick it up immediately, which is very strong, right? And
Right.
the feedback you got was, well, Eric, no, this communicates that you're actually not connected to us or to the challenges at hand. It connects a
Right.
superficial getting through things, like fixing things. I can hear your wife maybe saying, I don't want advice. I want you to listen, like that,
That's right.
something like that,
That's
right?
exactly right. And it connected me back to a period in my earlier career. And I came up during consulting. So I spent my first 10 years at Microsoft in the field as a consultant, where you need to be an answer person because that's what they're paying your hourly rate there to do. They don't want to hear you listen and empathize and all that kind of stuff. They want somebody that knows the answer. And this is early in career. The more senior you get, when you go to talk with executives, that's really where you need to figure out how to listen and to emotionally, bond with people. But in my early career, they're like, Eric is a gunslinger. He's got a pair of six-shot, guns on his hip. We need to deploy him. He needs to go in and, lay down the problems and then leave and go do it again. And I'm like,
Awesome.
absolutely, I love that. Not so useful these days, right? Being a gunslinger at this end of the pool is not something that is important or appreciated by senior leadership. It is when there's a crisis and a challenge, as I write about in my book. But in some instances, you actually do have to employ that cognitive, professional, emotional intelligence.
I understand. So in this situation, you got this feedback. It sounds like pretty recently. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is like processing. So how is Eric processing this? Because so basically no gunslinging, Eric. Don't do it. So how are you processing this? How do you work with this?
Yeah. So in this moment, Hilke, when you're asking me,
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest and say I don't have the answer. Eric, maybe of 2 weeks ago, would have been like, "Let me tell you what I'm going to do," right?
Which exactly is the
Um,
thing. Yeah.
which is exactly the thing that I'm trying to
Yeah.
avoid. But I can tell you that what I do plan to do is figure out how to start small, and I don't have the answer yet. If you ask me, like I have a few ideas, but I have to figure out, like in the next meeting, in the next all hands, in the next leadership session, how do I show up and balance? I mean, people like confident leaders. People like leaders that know where the hill is and what flag to go after. But maybe you don't have to be that all the time. Maybe you have the opportunity to say, listen, these are the things that I am worried about. In fact, it's a question that I ask on many interviews at the executive level. What are the things that you're worried about? It's a common interview technique so that you can be like, oh, I can actually do those things you're worried about. But being able to express that is something that it's an area of vulnerability, I think, that people like in leaders. It's the infallible confident leader that people tend to doubt over time, and that's the bulk of the feedback that I got. That's what I'm taking away from it. And that some leaders need to show vulnerability, at the same time they need to show strength and certainty. And so I don't know, Hilke, the answer to that question. That's me being reflective and being mature and not making things up on
It
the
sounds
spot.
to me like you're actually practicing part of the answer,
I'm attempting to
which is
practice it, right?
right by being vulnerable about, hey, this is a challenge and I'm in the middle of it. Let's sit
Right.
in it. Let's sit in it. I also hear,
I think that people from our age group are like, don't show any weakness, only strengths, because the weaknesses will actually help, will knock you down in your performance appraisal, right? And I think we've got an opportunity to say that you can be vulnerable but still be strong at work.
and so I want to hear more about that. We're going to take a break in a just a few minutes. I want to hear more from you about how did you learn that performance mindset? You had to perform, have it all together. That's one question I want to go deeper in after the break. Like, how did you learn that through your life, maybe even early life? And then the question I want to think about before the break is, Eric, we're living in a time with huge change. Technology companies, the people that I hear about, that talk about, people talk about the deal has changed. It was no longer that the company takes care of me. AI is people being CEOs are being proud of laying off people. It seems like because of efficiencies with AI and so on. So the performance up or out is, or you and me, like it seems like that is the culture that's re-emerging
Mhm.
in some way in some technology companies. I'm not sure it's in all because I don't work in all technology companies. So tell us about, how do you work being vulnerable and firm in a situation where it's getting a little tougher?
Yeah, great question. If I were to dive in at the top of what you said and just kind of take all those considerations because they are at the top of mind for everybody, and including myself. To me, it's all about, and as I look back across my career, and in technology, there's always change. You have to learn to be a constant student. And in fact, Satya Nadella, when he took over at Microsoft, that was maybe in the middle of my career there, and he said, "I want you to go from being a know-it-all to being a learn-it-all. I want you to adopt this growth mindset," which is one of my favorite books by Carol Dweck. And growth mindset is, I am okay not knowing, and I'm okay looking at things and realizing that hard work is better than being super smart about everything. And so understanding that perspective led me into figuring out how I deal with the change that happens, not just in my industry, but happens in life, but happens in your professions and happens in your career. There's two perspectives that people on my team are probably tired of hearing me talk about. You can either be part of the change or you can be subject to the change. And change can be internal or external. I like to be part of the change. So whenever you get a new leader, there's in technology organizations, we call it reorganization season. The reorg season is, you're going to go from this manager who you've been spending a bunch of time with trying to influence and have career credit with, and now you're going to move to this manager who's never heard of you and has no idea and is getting two other teams in addition to your team. And they have their own teams and their own connections of people. And now you're like, oh, great. My entire career credit that I had with that one individual has now been shifted. And so you can kind of sit back and be like, gosh, this is catastrophic. well, let me just put my defensor shields up and figure out how I can keep my team. And are there people over there that do what I do? Am I going to be fired? Things like that. Or you could reach out to that manager and say, hey, happy to be joining your team. Love to schedule time to chat with you. Want to introduce you to who I am, what my team does. Love to get your perspectives, what you're worried about, how we can match. So there's being part of the change in that way, and there's being subject to the change, which is defense mode and fearing change. So that's kind of how I think about AI. Like, yes, many organizations and Wall Street love the fact when you lay off layers and you people and you shareholders love it, and then replace it with AI agents. But the question becomes, well, how can I lean into working with AI agents to creating my own agents to optimize my own productivity? So there's often ways in which you can either fear the change or you can be part of the change and lean into it.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break. After the break, we will actually expand more on that question. How do we lean in with firmness and vulnerability? And also, how did we learn? How did you learn, Eric, this performance, and how have you been able to create some more space around it? You're listening to Rooted and Unwavering with Eric Charran, also author of a wonderful book about the subject that we're talking about. The book is called Have You Ever Had a Boss That ... And we're talking about how to lead with firmness and vulnerability, especially when we exchange tough feedback or perspectives with each other. See you after the break.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
So you're listening to Rooted and Unwavering. We're talking to Eric Charran, visionary leader and author about feedback, growth, performance, leaning into change. Let's start with that last bit that we just talked about before the break, Eric. This leaning into change, not being the object or subject to it, but actually being in it. We call this in our work also the 1% principle, focusing on what you can control and letting go of the 99%, just staying very focused on that. So how do we, in leaning in this moment, stay firm and at the same time practice this wanting to learn it all, humility? How do we do that?
It's a balance, and I think this is something that we talked about at the beginning of our time together. And it's just like life. Life is a balance. Too much, or my father used to say, too much of anything is bad, and I've yet to find an instance where that's not true. In my existence as a human here on Earth. So staying firm, the way I think about staying firm is leaders need to have conviction, and they need to be able to have that conviction almost virally adopted by the teams that they manage, the people that they manage. It's really being able to create an attractive philosophy or proposition or opinion on the way things should be, and how you want to lead and what your team is there to do and the purpose of the team, to reinforce that, and then to be able to inspire people to want to serve that actual perspective. And for them to do that, it's all about determining what brings people energy and what takes energy away. Having that awareness is very, very important for me around change, and being balancing vulnerability and having a clear direction and a conviction. It's all about figuring out what brings me energy and what takes my energy away. What takes my energy away is catastrophizing and worrying about all of the things that could possibly happen, and then driving my own actions in my day to day based on avoiding catastrophes. Listen, every executive leader has to deal with that. There's politics everywhere, there's organizational change everywhere, there's opportunities everywhere. But what you said earlier, which is the way that I interpret it, is what do you get to do? What is in your sphere of influence? What do you have the opportunity to do? And that to me brings me energy. And in the execution of that, certainly you do have to make sure that in order to nurture and to grow that opportunity, that you look out for potential pitfalls, but you're driving it from a perspective of control and from conviction and from directedness. And you're hopefully bringing people along and saying, this is why I believe these things. And this is why I think that this is going to be a good thing for us to do. And this is what it's going to take for us to get there. Some energy givers, some creativity, some not so great things about conforming to recurring meetings and producing slide decks and spending way too much time talking to leadership about what we do versus doing the work, and how do we balance all those things. There's always going to be energy takers, but I want to create a space where there are energy givers. That to me connects to my self-awareness muscle that I had to build over time, which is, how do people receive what I'm saying? If I take myself out of my body and I attend my meeting as another individual, how would I hear what Eric has said? How would I react to it? And that's an exercise I think is valuable for every leader. Now, certainly there are different types of people and you can't embody everybody, but the goal would be to say, the majority of times, how would I hear what I'm saying? Does it inspire me? Did they give in that conviction that I gave? Are people believing that, hey, I'm not so sure about this, but Eric has gotten it right most of the time, so I believe in what he's saying? Or no, I'm going to challenge. And in many instances, sometimes it's embodying and learning about that challenge before it happens, so that you can say, hey, I know many of you are thinking this. Many of you probably feel this way. Here's my perspective on that, but happy to listen to any other points of view. So it's all of those communication patterns, just kind of anticipating what people are feeling, and then that's where I drive my balance from.
So I hear that as empathetic firmness. It's being in a shared space. I love this. I put myself in their body for a moment. Like, is attending Eric's meeting giving me energy, or is it like a downer? Where am I? Like, what's going on? And is the vision that I'm creating energy giving, or is it energy taking? And being also curious about how things land, and anticipating that. So now let's go to this performance mindset for a moment, because that is something that seems to have been driving you in your life for a while. So tell us a little bit about really going back, little Eric. Like, how did you learn that performance was important, and what was going to make you successful, and then how did you have to adjust that? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So young Eric, maybe in my early 20s, economically, it was the most miserable time in my life. And maybe people our age can think back to your 20s and you remember how much you wanted things and you didn't have enough capital to get those things. And so you're constantly, my younger self, I was like, okay, how do I make more money? How do I get promotions? Job performance is the gateway to good reviews. Good reviews are the gateways to good bonuses. Good bonuses and good reviews are the gateway to promotion, and that's the gateway to more money, right? And so that's very much how a young, naive Eric used to look at the world. And a job it was work. It's not fun. That's why they call it work. And your goal is to just work hard. And I had naturally, I probably had a lot of determination. And I never give up. And for people like me, you oftentimes have to figure out how you can get into meetings where you don't belong, or you don't look like everybody else and sound like everybody else, but you can go into that meeting and leave a lasting impression and have people know your name and new opportunities come. And it was all in the pursuit of economic prosperity. Looking at it now, performance to me is, how do there's a saying that, if you do what you love, you never work another day in your life. I tend to subscribe to that. And so the question became, well, how do I align myself with opportunities and career velocity? But it became less about economic prosperity. Now, certainly that comes, and it's certainly something I'm oftentimes worried about and looking after. But at the same time, it's, how do I get into a position where this doesn't feel like work most of the time, but it feels like me being able to learn and grow and challenge myself? Because I've been in positions where you hit the performance metrics. At Microsoft, you get like a giant red jacket if you do a good job. I did that a few times. There's not a lot of people that get that red jacket at the company. And so you reach this plateau and you're like, okay, what else? What else is there? And then when you're going through it again, you're like, why did I put myself through this? And then at the other side, you're like, I put myself through this because now I'm a better leader. I'm a better technologist. I'm an innovative thinker. Instead of learning about new frameworks, I'm actually defining them and putting them out there for other people to use. So I think that those are the things that drive what I think about in terms of performance nowadays, which is certainly as executives, we all have to adhere to numerically measured performance metrics. The other thing that I learned in, being kind of like a perennial overachiever was do the job you have and do it well and crush it, and then do the job you want at the same time. And when you do that job you want at the next level, it doesn't nobody's going to ever come along, at least in my professional experience, and be like, you know what, that kid Eric Charran, he's doing a great job. Let's promote him. That has never happened to me. Let me put it that way. And I doubt that that's common. Instead, it's doing the job you want, doing the job you have, doing the job you want, doing awesome at both, and then telling people about it in a way that is not self-aggrandizing. So it's an art form. So those are the ways in which I often tell my team, if you're doing a great job, I am not going to be able to look over your shoulder and be like, promote that person. I need to know the amazing things you do, but I need to know it in context. I need you to be a servant-driven leader, if you will, instead of being a self-aggrandizing leader.
So talk about that for a moment, because that balance, we talk a lot about balance in this conversation, like between firmness and humility, being having conviction and staying open. Now we're talking, I hear you talk about not being self-aggrandizing. At the same time, if I want to make progress, people have to know about my progress.
That's right.
So how do you do this?
It's like trying to bake an ice cube, right? It's
how do you do this, Eric?
It seems contradictory.
Yeah.
So listen, I don't know if I am good enough to give people a prescriptive formula on how to do it. I can talk about how I did it.
Tell us a little story. Tell us a little story. Yes.
Sure. So there were periods of time in which I know that I did an amazing job. So this was me maybe in the field before I became chief architect of the services division. I was the first or second chief architect. It was a brand new position. No one had really defined it. It was just reserved for smart people. The organization didn't really know what to do with people in this position. And so I said, I want to do that. And so the question became, well, how do I prove that I'm ready? I can't just go in and start, spinning up a bunch of technology jargon and frameworks and all this kind of stuff to leadership, because they will just be like, this person's really smart, but I don't know if I could put him in front of an executive. So I began to try to anticipate all of the resistance, the opposition to having a very, very deep technical person that's well respected in my field become and ascend to this level of executive influence in this executive position. And so I began to, I was working with my manager at the time, and this manager, one of the best managers I've had in my career, and I'm including this person because without them, this wouldn't have happened. So we began to develop my story, and it was a very pre-Satya Nadella, Steve Ballmer-esque type of story, which was Eric is brilliant because of all these things. This many millions of dollars, this much technical frameworks, this many inventions, this many patents filed. And it became kind of like a baseball card of why this person's an all-star. And my manager at the time was like, this is not going to go well with our new manager, who was a divisional executive, new to the company, because it talks about why you're an awesome player, but what's missing is how you made others great. What's missing is how you matured the business and what the lasting impacts were. What's missing is the stories around how you helped a customer out of a tough jam, and that because of your efforts, this is what was accomplished. It's missing, if Eric wasn't here, this success across all these individuals at the organization and all the customers wouldn't have happened. And reframing it and having a manager that had that insight and was able to amplify and to tell the story in a new way that was not a well-known muscle at Microsoft was really how we began to figure out what that balance was. So, and in fact, it was such an innovative way that our entire performance management cycle at Microsoft was reoriented. It really wasn't about what you achieved and how many bodies you left behind you. It's what did you achieve together and who did you involve and how did you make others great? And that was our perspectives refactoring of how Microsoft looks at performance. That philosophy actually helped me say that, hey, I made these other people great, and together what we did was this for an amazing outcome. That is the balance, right? It's less about being self-aggrandizing, but clearly at the end of that, you want to have somebody that can amplify and say, if Eric was not there, this would not have happened.
And what I'm hearing between the lines, Eric, it's almost like when I'm focused on making other people great, really making the business great, people will start talking about me as that without me even having to do it myself.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because, and listen, a lot of organizations still stack rank in terms of their professional growth and development and figuring out how much money you get at the end of the year. A lot of modern organizations have moved away from that to giving managers the budget and you rank your individuals. But for those organizations that stack rank, and for those of your listeners that know what a performance management cycle is like, when you do stack rank, you strap on your armor, you go visit you go to the conversations, and you say that, hey, my person did this, and no, well, my person did this too, and hey, they did it better. So in that session, you want to have people hype up and say, no, this person did a fantastic job. Yes, I also connected with this person, and this is what they did for me lately. And they did it in a way that grew my team. You want to have that natural chorus around your individual achievements as you move into these. You try to move up with an organization.
I love that. Creating a natural chorus for you, basically, without
Right.
being self-aggrandizing. So, Eric, you strike me as a person that has a lot of experience, has a lot of enthusiasm, is able to get in the player seat, the 1% principle seat, like taking control or focusing, not being controlling, but focusing on what you can control and making the best out of it. Do you have down days?
Do I have down days? It's tough for me because I probably don't think about this in a healthy way.
Okay.
So this is going to be one of those do as I say, don't do as I do scenarios.
Yeah,
I
great.
probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about whether or not it's a down day, because when I probably do have down, I definitely have down days, but I don't spend a lot thinking and I'm going to use the wrong words here. I don't wallow in the downness, if you
Okay.
will.
Yeah.
I quickly move beyond being down to what can I control?
Hmm.
How can I take this situation and navigate through it to the best of my ability? How can I use my natural determination, my optimism, my the magic that everybody has inside them? How do I use the Eric magic to make this situation better? Um, Maybe that's not good, because maybe I should spend time realizing that I'm down, but I don't. I'm sensing that, maybe from a mental health perspective, might not be terrific. But it's how I'm wired. It's for me, it's the recognition that human beings are wired evolutionarily to be negative, to look for threats. And I often tell my kids that, hey, if you look for the reason why somebody doesn't like you or that people are out to get you, you're going to find it. What's harder to look for is how you actually turn things around to be the way that you want,
Hmm.
and that makes everybody happy. And so I maybe oversubscribe to that philosophy, Hilke. So I'm sure I do have down days, but by the time I realize it's a down day, I've already moved on to figuring out what I'm going to do.
I find it very inspiring, Eric, that you say, no, I am so determined and so clear that also I know that evolutionary focus might go there to the place that of threat, and I'm just not spending my time there. I'm just not going to spend my time there. And I'm also helping my kids to say, yeah, you can think about who you want to be. Don't dwell on the things that people might not like about you, because there's always going to be that too. So,
That's exactly right. And in fact, one of the things, for my career, I did spend time, you've spent too much time in a role when you become jaded, right? And in fact, I write about this in the book. You get into this downward spiral to the point where there was a period of time in my career where I stayed in the role for too long, and I'm like looking at meetings and I'm like, hey, I wasn't included on that meeting. Why was I not included in that meeting? Maybe it's because they're looking to get rid of me. If they're looking to get rid of me, that's a whole it's a whole you'll see threats even if they're not there. You'll find
right.
them, and it's a whole downward spiral that you can avoid.
Beautiful. What would you say to a person that is not sitting in your mindset at the moment, that is thinking about, like, is feeling a little overwhelmed? And I hear a
Yeah.
lot of those people that to me tell me at the moment, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, or little to a lot overwhelmed with AI, job insecurity, change, all these things. What would you say to a person like that?
One of the things I write about in the book is the fact that you need to know your worth. So the book is all about dealing with well, I won't call them bad, managers and who are people that exhibit unhelpful behaviors because that's all they know. Leaders lead how they were led. And the question becomes, well, in that scenario, you could spend and implement every technique that I talk about anecdotally through some of my very real experiences, which I wrote about in the book, and it still might not work out. So then what do you do? And I talk about how you need to know your worth.
Mm.
In any difficult situation in which you're feeling down or you're feeling subject to, or you actually are experiencing professional churn, or whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, the idea is to be confident and know your own worth. Confidence is the closest thing that I think that human beings have to magic. It is an ephemeral cognitive property because some people are born with it, some people manufacture it, sometimes people only gain it through doing things, but you can manifest it, right? So have an unreasonable amount of confidence in your own worth and understanding what you're worth, and then drive from there. Because once you understand what you're worth, you can determine whether or not you need to stick around for or tolerate these circumstances. Many people take their managers and they become these mystical beings that are in control of their economic and your career for prosperity. And in many instances, that's true. But at the same time, your manager needs to constantly be re-recruiting you with every conversation. I know I think about that when I talk to my people. And so, you were hired for your talent, and you are not in servitude. Be a servant leader, but you're not in servitude to the organization. You can leave at any time. In fact, my father used to tell me that the best time to look for a job is when you're happy with the one you have, because you're not running from a burning building, you're running to something that's better. So know your worth is really the way to drive confidence and to deal with down situations and say, you know what, I am going to put up with this. I'm going to move forward in this, or I'm not. I'm going to go look for something else.
Because I know my worth. Now, how do
Mhm.
you find your worth?
That's a great question. It's a combination, I think, for me, of having a good, honest assessment of what you're good at and what you love to do and what you're not good at. So there's these manager archetypes I write about in the book, and as I was writing the book around these unhelpful behaviors, I began to realize that I exhibit a lot of these unhelpful behaviors. Sometimes, Hilke, I solve the same problem twice because I forgot I solved it the first time. And my team is very patient. They understand, and I'm honest with the fact that my memory is terrible. If I don't write it down, I look at every challenge as a new creative way to solve things. And sometimes solve the same problem the same way twice. Sometimes I solve the same problem twice in different ways, right? And they're like, "Hey, Eric, you're doing it again," and I'm like, "Okay, gotcha. If I
Yep.
already solved it, let's move on." So knowing your weaknesses I'll call them areas of opportunity, is super important. And then you need to determine, hey, is that something I want to spend time on getting better at, or do I actually want to leverage a team to help me grow beyond those weaknesses and achieve in spite of them? So I think that also knowing what you're honestly good at. What did you do? I mean, what's interesting about working for an organization is that they will tell you at the end of the year what you did well at and where you can improve.
Mhm.
You may agree and disagree. Some of those things might be, skewed a little bit. But if you have a really good manager that's interested in your career, they're going to do their best to be honest with you about what you're really good at and where you need to grow. So having that open mindset, understanding that you're not going to be perfect, that you're not here to eradicate weakness, as you and I were probably raised professionally to do, but to improve continuously and learn, I think is important. Is how you arrive at understanding your worth.
So I hear a lot about worth. First of all, it drives a sense of boundaries also. Like, this is what I'm going to accept. This is what I'm not accepting. It's in part founded on the knowledge of what I'm good about and good at. Um, I get signals from that, about that, from the people around me, from the company that I work with. I also need to be aware of, and I want to be aware of, that I'm not so good at. And I can be confident about that, and I can choose whether I engage in that or not. And then how I engage in that becomes part of a journey that I can be confident about as well. Yeah.
Right. It's extremely empowering to say, gosh, I hope I get a good review, versus what is this organization doing to earn another month of my time? Right. It's extremely empowering to say, why should I stay with this team? Why should I stay with this manager? How are they actually making me feel that this is the team I want to continue playing for? Or should I go look for another team that's going to value me better?
Such a refreshing perspective. Is this team worth another month of my time? Is this client, is this relationship and worth this? Is this worth my time? It's a very empowering perspective. Very empowering perspective.
Yep.
So we're getting towards the very final minutes of our conversation. I've learned a lot from this conversation about balance between confidence and humility, creating feedback. What I hear you say is reframing feedback as perspectives. I hear you talk about confidence being grounded in your strengths. I also hear you talk about focusing on what you can control and not dwelling in the negative. And really, what I hear you say is cultivate not your aggrandizement, but your real, true confidence. And then lead with that empathic confidence where you include people. You think about do I want to be in Eric's meeting? That's one of my favorite things. Do I want to be included in this? That is going to be one of the things that I love taking away from this. Eric, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I think that working in an organization is extremely difficult, especially if you've been around as long as maybe folks like you and I have. You're constantly having to overcome your own perspectives. You have to really build a muscle of self-awareness. Confidence is the closest thing that human beings have to magic. Know your worth. I think it's important for everybody to really take control and say, why should I stay here? Why does this organization deserve my talent? And do I believe in what I'm doing? These are all empowering ways to avoid being negative, which is very, very easy to do. And it's the least satisfying thing to do. So I think those are kind of maybe my the things that I think about and that I'm taking with me into this next phase of my career.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a true pleasure. Confidence is the closest thing we have of like magic. I think that's a t-shirt. So thank you for that. If you like and if you want to know more about Eric Charran's work, you can also read his book. Have you ever had a boss that you can find on Amazon and other places? You can also connect with Eric, of course, via LinkedIn and other places. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to Rooted and Unwavering on LinkedIn or any other place that you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. We have been listening to Eric Charran tell us about the power of confidence, the closest thing we have to magic, and really finding ways to build authentic confidence. This is Rooted and Unwavering. We've been broadcasting live. Today was in Philadelphia and Phoenix, where we help leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber, and see you next time.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.